In COMOSYS, all your detailing needs are met by manual detailing commands at the top, and you can use them to detail anything you want. But to speed up the detailing process, many macros are available in the macro gallery on the right-hand side, as you can see. And these are grouped together, like beam-to-beam connections or beam-to-column connections or bracing connections, splice connections, etc., and they go all the way down. Now, this video is about giving you general information about how to use macros. Now, obviously, to use a macro, you will need to click on the macro and then select whatever it requires you to select. Mostly it will be one main member and one secondary member, or maybe more than one secondary members, and then right click to finish the job. That's the normal way macros will work. Some macros require you to choose a point. Sometimes they require you to choose a beam and a point or something like that. And whatever it's asking you, it will usually say that in the bottom status bar somewhere over here. So that would be the way you would go about clicking and using a macro. Now, once you have created a connection, so for example, there is a fin plate connection over here created by using this macro over here. Once you have created a connection, let me turn on the macro symbols. So this is the visibility for the macro symbols, and you can see the macro symbol over there. You can select that macro symbol, for example, and double click it to open up the dialog box. But usually this is not the preferred way because you'll have many macros, and the symbols usually end up creating a little clutter. So you could have 3 or 4 macros over here, and you could end up with a clutter. So the usual way of doing it is to keep the macro symbols turned off like this. Also, like you saw, sometimes selecting the thing because it can be coinciding with something else. So you might have some selection issues, although you can usually go through them by just changing the draw mode for a second. And so if you double click on the macro symbol, it'll open up the macro dialog box. But what I wanted to say was, let me bring it back to the original mode. The usual way to work with this is to turn off the macro symbols. And then if you want to access the macro dialog box, you select any object created by the macro. Let me turn off the handles as well. Any object, whether it's the plate or the bolt or the weld or anything which the macro has created, a cut, a plate, like I said. Let's select the plate over here. And when you select the plate, you just click on the M key, M for macro. When you click on that, it selects the macro symbol in the background, although it's not visible on the screen, but it will select it in the background. And then if you press enter, the macro dialog box will appear. So you can open and access the macro dialog box very quickly by selecting any created element of the macro, pressing the M key, and then pressing enter. Now, a third way of opening up the dialog box of the macro is to use this toggle button at the bottom over here. And this one basically allows you to toggle between selecting actual objects or selecting the macro symbol. So normally when this is turned off like this, when I select the plate, I can double click on the plate and the plates dialog box will open. I can double click on the bolt and the bolts dialog box will open. But if I toggle this switch to on, then if I double click on the plate, which is a part of what was created by the macro, if I double click on this one, the macros dialog box will open. So that's another way of doing it. This is sometimes also not preferred because normally you're doing a lot of manual editing and you don't want, you want to change the bolt, for example, manually sometimes. And then when you double click on the bolt, you don't want the macro dialog box to open, you want the actual bolt dialog box to open. So depending on the need, sometimes you could want it the other way as well. But these 3 options are available. Either you can, let me turn this back on. Either you can turn on the macro symbol directly and just select it and press enter or double click it. That'll open up the dialog box. Or you could just select anything created by the macro and press M. then press enter, or turn on this toggle and just double click on anything created by the macro. Me personally, I've developed a habit of just selecting and pressing M enter, because pressing M enter is very fast in some, because it looks like pressing two keys, but you're basically doing it in the same movement of the hand. So it's very convenient, because I like to keep the macro symbols turned off so that they don't create clutter in the model. And I can always just go M enter and I'm good with it. And this, if I don't want to turn this off as well, because when I double click on a particular element, I want to basically be able to get its own dialog box open. Now let's open up the dialog box of this fin plate, pressing M and enter. You'll see that typically almost all macros will have this kind of a structure, tab page structure. There will be a general tab which will have some pictures maybe, and they'll be self-explanatory. There'll be some inputs over there, usually some distances or something to turn on or off, like that. Then there will be a bolts tab, which will be basically about the bolts created by that macro, and what kind of assembly do you want to use in that bolt, what kind of bolt diameter do you want to use, what tolerance. These are the most commonly used ones. Then of course any slot hole related requirements, or whether you want the washers in a particular way, etc. So there'll be a bolt tab which will have as many of these as there could be multiple bolt tabs as well. So if the macro is creating, let's say, three separate bolt groups, you might have three separate bolt tabs over here. But in principle, there'll be bolt tabs. Then there'll be plate tabs, depending on, and the plate tab will have will typically look like this. That there'll be a line in which you can enter the plate thickness. So for example, this particular macro can create two plates, the fin plate and a back stiffener if needed. And you can enter the thicknesses, you can give them names, you can give them the part position number prefixes, assembly position number prefixes, etc. So this kind of information, usually in the form of lines, and maybe some explanatory picture as well. So there'll be bolt tabs, there'll be plate tabs, there'll be weld tabs, and weld tabs will usually look like this, multiple lines of this, depending on how many welds the macro is creating. And for each weld the macro will create, there will be two sizes, the above and below line sizes, the type of the weld, other details, etc., the weld material, etc. This one will sometimes be there, sometimes not, depending on the case. But then there will be a very important tab called the macro presets tab, which will be available in all the macros. And this will allow you, if you want to do a particular type of connection for, say, IPE 300, you could set up your settings, your bolt settings, your plate settings, your distances, everything, and then save it. You could just give it, when you press on save, it'll ask you for a name, and you can say IPE 300, and that list will then be saved over here. And you can of course have multiple presets. You can, so all the beams which you typically use in your modeling, let's say you've got 30, 40, 50 beams which you normally use, you can all give them different names, different preset names, and just save them away. And then you can also copy those presets into your environment folder, so that every new model is opened with those presets available. So this will be the general structure of any macro which you will use in COMOSYS. So just wanted to get you familiar with that. Now, just like you can select the macro symbol of a single macro, you can also select macro symbols of multiple macros at the same time. So for example, if I were to select this plate and this plate and then press M, both the macro symbols of both those fin plate macros will be selected. And now if I press enter, it will open up this dialog box, which will say that I've got two fin plates selected. And if I double click on that, it will open up the dialog box, and I can make modifications to both of them at the same time. So that's quite convenient. Now let's do something. So over here, if I zoom out a bit and I just do a general window selection like that, and now if I press enter using on the fly filtering, it's telling me that you've selected 15 profiles, 13 plates, 14 bolts, but you've also selected 9 different macros. And if I were to click on the macros, it's telling me that, so if you remember, there were a few fin plate macros in there, but it's telling me that there are two beam to beam angle cleat macros over there. There are two bolted gusset macros. These are this one and this one. The angle cleat ones are the connections of the beam to the column at the end. Two fin plate macros, which we just saw, and three stiffener macros, which were this one and this one. So if I select all 9 of them, then pressing enter will not help because it doesn't know which dialog box to open. So if I select all these 9 macros, I cannot say display property editor because which one is it going to open, whether it's going to open the fin plate or the stiffener or the angle cleat or what. But if I were to click on the for example, the beam to beam angle cleat connection, 2 of those over there, I could say display property editor, and it's going to take me to that page, and then I can open up that dialog box for those. So multiple selection related editing of macros is also very simple. You can either edit a single macro, or you can just do a window selection and edit multiple ones of those. And using on the fly filtering, you can then select the exact ones which you want. There's a lot more detail about how this can be further refined into even subdividing the cases according to the angle of approach and the beam group and the beam section size and this and that, which really helps you to do very quick, fast selection. And you can learn about that in the on-the-fly filtering training video. But for the moment, let this suffice that you can do multiple. You can select a single macro symbol and enter it, or you can enter multiple ones, select multiple ones and enter and press enter as well. I would strongly suggest that you watch the training videos for auto presets and one-click connect and the project preferences files and all the files which allow macros to work with one-click connect. Those will really help you use macros in a much better, more organized way and get the most out of the software.